Some US troops were already moving toward Poland. Then the order came, stop. Pentagon abruptly cancelled the deployment of a 4,000-strong armoured brigade meant to reinforce NATO's eastern flank, fueling new fears across Europe about Washington's long-term commitment to the alliance. For countries bordering Russia, the message is hard to ignore. Some of the troops were already on their way. Then, the Pentagon abruptly cancelled the deployment of an armoured brigade to Poland, catching military officials off guard. The unit, the 2nd Armoured Brigade Combat Team of the 1st Cavalry Division, had nearly 4,000 troops assigned to a 9-month mission across NATO's eastern flank. Some equipment and personnel were already en route when the order came through. Polish officials moved quickly to contain the fallout, insisting the decision was about US force reductions elsewhere, not a downgrading of the alliance with Warsaw. Deputy Prime Minister of Poland Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz said,
"This issue does not concern Poland. It relates to the previously announced change in the presence of some US armed forces in Europe. The rapidly developing capabilities of the Polish armed forces and the presence of US forces in Poland strengthen NATO's eastern flank."
The reassurance carried an awkward footnote. Just last week, Trump had praised Poland and suggested troops pulled from Germany could be sent there instead. The cancellation followed a Pentagon announcement that 5,000 troops would be withdrawn from Germany, a decision linked to Trump's anger over Chancellor Friedrich Merz's criticism of Washington's handling of the war with Iran. Trump has since said the cuts would go further, with Italy and Spain also under consideration. The numbers tell their own story. US troop levels in Poland had hovered between 8,000 and 10,000 since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. The loss of this brigade, combined with the earlier end of a 101st Airborne rotation in Romania, would bring American force levels in Europe back to roughly where they stood 4.5 years ago. Poland has been lobbying hard to host more US forces, not fewer. For now, the Pentagon has offered no details on what comes next. It started with a war, and it may end with an alliance. Trump has told The Telegraph he is strongly considering pulling the United States out of NATO. Not as a negotiating tactic, not as a campaign threat, but as a direct consequence of what he calls a betrayal during his war on Iran. His words were blunt.
"Oh yes, I would say it's beyond reconsideration. I was never swayed by NATO. I always knew they were a paper tiger, and Putin knows that too, by the way."
A few days ago, Trump called NATO a paper tiger and said that he is disappointed with the organization.
They don't want to get dragged into their wars either. It's one thing, we're very disappointed, I'll say it publicly, we're very disappointed with NATO because NATO has done absolutely nothing. And I've always said, 25 years ago, I was somebody that wasn't a politician, but I was always involved in politics and I understood politics. I said 25 years ago that NATO's a paper tiger, but more importantly, that we'll come to their rescue, but they will never come to ours. And I want you to remember that we said this, they didn't come to our rescue.
The breaking point was the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has effectively closed the waterway for weeks, through which 20% of the world's oil typically flows, sending energy prices spiraling and threatening a global recession. Trump demanded NATO allies send warships to reopen it. They refused, and Trump has not forgotten.
Beyond not being there, it was actually hard to believe. I just think it should be automatic.
It is the same logic he applied to Ukraine that America shows up, and allies don't. Now he's drawing a line. Secretary of State Marco Rubio had already signaled where this was heading. Speaking on Fox News, he called NATO a one-way street and accused allies of denying the US access to military bases during the Iran conflict.
So I think there's no doubt, unfortunately, after this conflict is concluded, we are going to have to re-examine that relationship. We're going to have to re-examine the value of NATO and that alliance for our country. Ultimately, that's a decision for the president to make, and he'll have to make it. We're going to finish the job here. As I said, we're very, very close to achieving our objectives on all of these things that I've outlined. But I do think, unfortunately, we are going to have to re-examine whether or not this alliance that has served this country well for a while is still serving that purpose, or is it now become a one-way street where America is simply in a position to defend Europe, but when we need the help of our allies, they're going to deny us basing rights and they're going to deny us overflight?
Trump said he was glad Rubio made those comments. Britain got its own rebuke. Trump singled out Prime Minister Keir Starmer for refusing to join the American-Israeli war against Iran, then questioned whether the Royal Navy was even capable. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, when asked about Trump saying he was strongly considering pulling the United States out of NATO, said he would act in the country's interest, whatever the noise.
Firstly, NATO is the single most effective military alliance the world has ever seen. And it has kept us safe for many decades, and we are fully committed to NATO. Secondly, that whatever the pressure on me and others, whatever the noise, I'm going to act in the British national interest in all the decisions that I make. And that's why I've been absolutely clear that this is not our war, and we're not going to get dragged into it.
So what actually happens if the US walks out? NATO doesn't vanish overnight, but it becomes a fundamentally different organization. The US contributes roughly 70% of NATO's total defense spending and provides the nuclear umbrella that makes Article 5, the attack one, attack all guarantee, credible. Without Washington, that guarantee becomes a promise Europe cannot keep alone. The countries most exposed are Poland and the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, sitting closest to Russia, having joined NATO precisely because of Russia. A US exit doesn't just weaken its security, it rewrites their reality. And Moscow would know exactly what it means. Putin, whom Trump himself acknowledged knows NATO is a paper tiger, would likely read a US withdrawal as the greatest strategic gift since the Cold War ended. Europe would be forced into a scramble, rearmament, bilateral deals, and a rushed attempt to build autonomous defense. France and the UK would try to anchor something. Germany would face its most consequential military decisions since 1945. Congress has passed legislation making unilateral withdrawal difficult. The legal and political resistance would be enormous. But the signal alone, a US president calling NATO a paper tiger and meaning it, has already changed the conversation. The alliance has held Europe at peace for over 75 years. What Trump is now describing isn't a renegotiation. It's a rupture, and Putin is already taking notes.